stuck in the wilderness because God decides that
Can I get a table?
This generation has to die.
Can I get a table for four?
Before we go into the promised land, because
Can I get a table?
you can take the people out of slavery,
Can I
but
get
you
a
can't take
table
the
in the
slavery out of the
wilderness?
people so
Can I
easily.
get a table for 16?
And they keep kvetching. They
In
keep
the
complaining.
wilderness? Can I get a table?
What happened to the
Can I get a
meals
table
we
for
had
four?
in Egypt? They were so good.
In
You
the
were
wilderness?
slaves in Egypt, for God's sakes. What'd you forget?
Can I get a table?
We forget.
Can I get a table in the wilderness? A table for
The truth
two.
is the next generation
Table for two.
isn't much
Can I
better.
get a table for one?
Joshua and Caleb, they saw the
Table in the
potential, but
Can I get a table for one?
I think it just became time to. So this psalm has really been a journey. What a perfect psalm to
We
begin
level the path.
our
We
learning
walk through the
of the
small
book of
path, the Shvil. We
Exodus
made our
as we do
people
this
go.
week. So
We went like sheep. We had a leader. Can I get a
so
table?
at least we can get a table.
In the
But this last
wilderness?
part of the psalm is going to take us back to Egypt,
Can I get a table?
back to the plagues.
Brought
did
them
it
to the
take?
holy border,
What did it
To the
take to free
mountain.
us, to take us to that
to
next
the
step?
mountain which the right hand had secured.
I think this psalm
We
has-
went to the mountain.
has a suggestion to that.
We got through the short path.
So,
Can I get a table?
you ready for
In the
Shabira?
wilderness.
Okay. So, it's become our custom, in addition to offering a psalm each day, in anticipation of a better time for the healing of the body and soul, to offer a Mishaberach, a healing prayer. And so for Reverend Vicky, for Sam, for our dear Jack, for Louis Kidder, his beautiful family, for Amy, two Amy's, one a sister, one a dear friend, and for my friend Choco. Choco, we love you. Pray for refuah shlema, complete healing for you too, and all the people that have COVID and cancer, all the people suffering. That's all we got. Calling on the angels to bring some healing.
The healing of the spirit and the healing of the body. The healing of the spirit, the healing of the body for those we know. For those we don't know. On my right, the angel Michael. On my left, the angel Gabriel. In front of me, the angel Uriel. Behind me, Raphael. And above my head, above my head, above my head, above my head, Shechinatel. Shechinatel. Michael, who's like God, Gabriel, God is my strength. Uriel, God is my light. Raphael, God is my healer, above my head, above my head, above my head, above my head. Shechinatel. Baruch atah Adonai Rofei HaCholim. Blessed are you, great healer. Amen.
For your brother-in-law. We have a wonderful group that meets on Sundays at 1 o'clock. Such a holy group. People that are living with mental illness, teaching us all so much how to deal with this anxiety I think that we're all feeling now. How to be honest. And so we always root everything that we do in learning. And these Psalms are a great anchor. Learning about the human spirit.
In learning.
The
Rooted
soul.
in learning.
We are rooted in learning.
Muted in learning?
Sometimes.
Rooted in learning.
Rooted in
I
learning.
like that. Rooted in learning.
We are rooted in learning, yeah.
V'ha'arevna Adonai Eloheinu et divrei toratcha b'finu u'b'fi amcha beit Yisrael. Make the words of your teachings pleasant, pleasant, pleasant on our lips, and the lips of all of those that come into our screens. Screams. ונחיה אנחנו וצאצאינו וצאצאי עמך בית ישראל. We can all spend a time learning for pleasure, for its pleasure, and also for its implications in our lives. The works of our hands, Maaseh Yadeinu, Maaseh Yadeinu. כולנו יודעי שמך ולומדי תורתך לשמה. All of us learning for its own sake, for the purity of it, its cleansing nature, rooted in learning, and also for its implications in our lives, in our lives, in our lives. Baruch atah Adonai melamed Torah le'amu Yisrael. Blessed are you who teaches in this fashion.
Amen. 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 Another thing I love about this psalm is that it is not linear. It is not linear. And so we're going to go back in this psalm. We're going to go back. It's going to take us back to the plagues.
Yeah,
You know, a time when everybody suffers.
the frog.
A time when we learn that lesson that until the people with power suffer, nothing really is going to change. But once they suffer too, once they see the notion that we are all connected.
The frog, the animals, the shepherd, the
Right.
herd.
Everything is going to suffer through the plains. That is what it took to get free. We forget that. So we're kind of starting at the middle of the story, and we're working our way back to how we got here, right?
The middle of the story.
Yeah.
That's an interesting point. Think about that for a second.
Right. So
You tell every story like that.
I do.
Yeah.
I do. I
You
know.
start in the middle.
I do. I do.
I say, wait a second.
What?
Are we talking about? Oh yeah, of course. That's good. I like that.
Yeah.
that.
I didn't always like it so much.
I do. I like it. You learned it from the Psalms.
I did. That's what the Psalms do. They try. So this, we got up to this place where despite everything, despite all of the wonders, all of the miracles, all of the time and time again that we're given another chance, that we're given quail, that we're given manna, that we're given water, that we're given shoes that don't wear out, that we're being taken out of slavery on this path to freedom. We're given the Torah, we're given Moses. We got all this, and despite all of this,
Shoes
verse
that don't
32.
wear out. I like that. That's good.
Despite all of this,
No, I don't know if we'll
we
finish this
sin.
today because it's still long, but
It's
it's
really
kind of
long.
interesting to do it in pieces like this.
Yeah, well, this one, because it's such a story.
Yeah, okay.
Despite all of this, we sin, and we had no faith in the wonders. The wonders weren't enough to carry us. They weren't enough.
Mm-hmm.
So verse 33, therefore.
Lachid. So
Right?
unpoetic. All of a sudden you get this word, therefore.
Yechal.
It happens though.
Therefore.
People that speak poetry sometimes
Listen to
get
this. This
prosaic.
is such a beautiful translation.
Okay.
God let their days pass in nothingness and their years in consternation. This guy translates it, God made their days disappear in vapor, their years in sudden terror. In other words, this is where we learn that this generation has to die.
Shadows of smoke.
They're not going to go
Nothing
into the land
really.
because, too much trauma. They can't escape from who they are, the baggage that they carry. But hopefully the next generation will be less burdened and will not have known slavery. And so they will have the holy chutzpah to believe that not only can they be free, but that everyone can be free. So we're going to, this generation has to die in Hevel and Reik, right? Vapor. Verse 34. If God slew them among them.
We did this already.
Well, we have to kind
You
of
want to
catch
go
up.
back?
Right?
Okay.
Yeah, just
Okay,
catch
that's
up.
cool.
All right. God slew them. They would seek God and turn back and search for God. I mean, that was the thing, right? They died. Korach. They die at the greatest sin of ever, the sin of certainty, the sin of the golden calf. And okay, when we suffer, then we remember that God is their rock and redeemer. We remember, it's in there. We know this. They believed to beguile God with their mouths and shamed to God with their tongues. They were false with their mouths. They lied to God with their tongues. Their hearts were not sincere. They were not faithful. But God, being merciful, forgave sin and did not destroy. God turned God's anger away many times, did not give vent to all God's wrath. Remember there one time when God says, you're going to cry? I'm going to give you something to cry about. You're going to want meat? I'm going to give you so much meat it's going to come out your nose. Remember?
So
But just a few times that happens.
And then God remembered
That they were mere flesh. They were just
little shots.
They were little shots, a passing breeze that does not return. That's us.
As
How
Unamuno
often did
says,
they rebel against
flesh
God?
and bone. Bamidbar.
Yeah.
When a wind went, ruach olech v'lo yashuv, a wind came and passed and did not come again.
How often did they rebel?
Come
Repeatedly, they tested God. Not that God tested them, but they tested God. They tested faith, right? They lost their faith again and again and again. Pained, and this pained that moral center. They didn't remember the redemption. How God set God's signs against Egypt and wonders against the plains. So we're going to have to go back there. We're going to have to go back to when God turns their rivers into blood and their streams were not drinkable. Remember Dam, the first plague, sent swarms of insects that devoured them and frogs which destroyed them. Don't forget the plagues, except for the last plague. The plagues, everybody suffered through the plagues. Everybody. There was no water for anybody. The frogs came, the everything came and destroyed all of the crops, everybody's crops. Right? Although you don't have Hoshech in this one. Did you notice that?
No, yeah.
God consigned their crops to the grasshopper. Right? Produce to the locust swarms.
Barad.
Killed their vines with hail, barad, and their sycamores with frost. 48. Conveyed their cattle
יסגיר ברד.
to hail and their flocks to lightning bolts. You know, nothing is going to be left here. There's a consequence. There's a consequence for enslaving one people. Everybody's going to suffer. God sent against them burning rage, fury and rage and trouble, a mission of harming messengers,
צרה.
and then smooth a path for anger,
משלחת
and did not
המלאכים
hold them back from death. Consigned their life to pestilence, smote. And here we go, the last one. The one where Pharaoh learns that if you're going to sacrifice the children of the other, ultimately your own children are going to suffer, right? Pharaoh learns this lesson. If you're going to make other of others and put their children at risk, ultimately you're going to lose your children too. And here it is, verse 51. God smote every firstborn Egyptian, the first fruits of their rigor in the tents of Ham. And only by God's grace and that little bit of blood on the doorpost were some saved. But don't forget, the firstborn, Hebrews were also slain by him.
ויח.
And then God led the people like sheep, guiding them like a flock in the wilderness, leading them safely.
ונחם לבטח, secure, and there was no fear.
Right. What does that mean? No fear when the sea closed upon their foes. In other words,
and the sea over our enemies.
It's like, I don't know. When I read those, I don't know if you felt this way, but when I read that word, I felt like, oh my God, only later. I mean, if you read this portion, the portion where the horses get drowned, the Egyptians get drowned, children say, but what about the horses? What did they do? I mean, it's a terrible scene. We get through, and then we see all this suffering. We see the Egyptians drowning with their horses, and the Midrash notices it because the Midrash says God won't allow the angels to sing with us, the Michamocha, right? The angels won't sing, God says, until all of my children are free. The angels are not allowed to sing when anybody's suffering, even the bad guys in this sense. So what does that mean that they were not afraid? Maybe that they were numb to the suffering of others because of their own trauma. We cannot be numb. We cannot be numb to the suffering of others. We have to feel every death. Okay, verse 54. God brought them to a holy territory, the very mount.
The border.
His right hand acquired. He drove out the nations before them, allotting by line their portion, settled the tribes of Israel in their tents. And still they tested and provoked God Most High. And they didn't keep God's rules. They backslided and were faithless like their fathers. They twisted like an undependable bow. They infuriated God with their high places. See, even that next generation. Their idols moved God to zealous rage. God heard and became incensed, felt great abhorrence toward Israel, abandoned the tabernacle at Shiloh, the tent God placed among mortals. Verse 61, God conveyed strength to captivity and glory in the hand of the foe. In other words, it's going to take us a long time to learn these lessons. We're going to keep slipping and sliding, and that Yetzer is going to get us again and again. God consigned our people to the sword. We're going to suffer. Felt abhorrence towards us. Because, we worship idols. We forget the moral center. We forget to do what's right. We forget about equity, right?
The young ones.
Fire will devour their young men. That's what happens with war, right? Their young maidens will be bereft of celebration because, we'll be fighting.
Going
We'll
up.
be
The
forgetting.
priests
The priests also will fell by the sword.
Bacherev, Nafal.
Why do their widows not weep? What's that?
Tivken.
Do you remember? What does he say about that?
They made no lamentations.
Maybe like Aaron, who was not allowed to
This is
cry
from
for his
Job.
son. Oh yeah. Wow. Then Adonai awoke.
They
As
panicked.
from
They were
asleep.
panicked.
Yeah, that's what happens. When
They cuts.
it's kind of like not crying when you see the waters swallowing the Egyptians. Sometimes you get into a place of trauma, right? And a place where you can only take small bites of the pain around you.
Then God awakened.
God awakens from sleep.
Like from sleeping.
As a hero sobered
Vayach
from
again.
wine. Wow,
Slept
this is
up.
pretty intense here.
Slept up. Slept
And
up
then-
the enemies.
God smote the foes, and they turned back, bringing them lasting disgrace. So our job is to figure out what are the foes. Indifference, silence, not caring about the suffering of others,
Slept up the flows.
bringing them lasting disgrace. That's our
Vayikra
inheritance, right?
et Shevet Yehuda.
All right, we're getting there. We're getting to the
The
end.
tribe of Yehuda. Har Zion, Asher Ahav, beloved that God loved.
God shows abhorrence toward the tent of Joseph and did not choose the tribe of Ephraim. That's not true, actually. Well, oh, that's true, right? We don't
Yeah, 'cause-
come from Joseph.
Because it came
We come
down
from Judah.
Shiloh.
Right. And we
Which
don't
was
choose the tribe of
in
Ephraim.
Ephraim's-
Joseph, the inheritor,
The
of
ark
Rachel.
was not restored there.
That's not who we will be,
restored in Jerusalem.
right? Not the favored
With
sons
Yehuda.
of Jacob, but Judah.
Vayivchar et
He
Shevet
chose the
Yehuda
tribe
et Har
of Judah,
Zion.
Mount Zion, which God loves.
Vayiven
Ugh,
Kamel
that's
Ramim.
where God built God's sanctuary, like the high
Migdashon.
heavens, like the earth which God founded forever. And then,
The omphalos, the belly button of the earth.
all right, here's the
Vayikachev
here's the end, right?
Michutzum.
Here's the
And
last
David,
lesson.
David, Vayivchar David.
God chose David, right? God's servant. Took him from the shepherds. Kind of like Moses, right? Moses was a shepherd that didn't let any of the sheep be left behind. So God chose David here.
Occupation, please.
Shepherd.
We also play flutes and ouds.
To be a servant. To be a servant
Nechar
leader.
Olot Hevi'u.
To be a servant leader.
A
That's
singing
what it
servant.
takes. Not to be
A
a big
singing
shot,
leader.
but to be, what did you call it? A little shot. To be a servant leader who is not numb. Who is not numb to the suffering
Nechar
and
Olot
doesn't leave
Hevi'u,
anybody
Ve'od
behind.
Yaakov Amo. To
Right?
shepherd over Jacob and the
Wow.
people
Verse 71.
in Israel.
God brought him from tending the nursing
Nachalato, inheritance.
ewes, the mother sheep that were nursing, to shepherd
Kitom
Jacob.
levavo.
to shepherd the people Israel. It's not that God doesn't love Jacob and Israel and Joseph and Ephraim and Manasseh and all of the tribes, but there has to be someone who reminds us nafsho kisharava nafsho, right? Like Judah did, that souls are bound up to each other. There has to be someone whose name is rooted in gratitude, in gratefulness for the wonders, and not in what we don't have, but in what we have.
Baruch Hashem.
And Judah, who ultimately is not numb to the suffering of others, and ultimately does care about his father's suffering.
Yehuda.
Judah,
I
that's
have
who we
the
are.
four-lettered name in me.
Yes, we are Judah.
Within
Remember that.
me.
That's the ultimate teaching, I think, of the journey that
Yud
this
Kei Vav Hei.
amazing psalm has taken us on. Verse
Dalet.
72. Because God shepherded us with the heart's integrity. What do you make of that
Kitom
phrase?
livavo,
The
purity of
heart's-
heart.
The heart's purity, the heart's integrity, and led them with skillful hands. Oh, that we should be led
Bitvuna,
with hearts of
Tavuna.
integrity
skill.
and skillful hands. That should be our prayer. Let's
Discernment
hear
in his hands.
how you
That's
take
a
us
good
through
line.
the end of this. You know, in the, can I just share this with, in the commentary on verse 5, Zlotowitz says, what does it mean to make them known to our offspring? According to the Talmud, a Jewish parent has 4 obligations: to teach Torah, to teach your children Torah, to teach them a trade, to help them find their Beshert, their sacred partner, and to teach them to swim. To have a viable life so that we can be part of the tikkun, the repair of the world, with servant leaders. Take us to
Discernment
a
in
holy
your
place.
hands.
Yeah, beautiful.
That you know what to do in your body.
Tell us.
Psalm 78, part 3. The frog, the animals, the shepherd, the hand.
Wow.
And God turned rivers to blood, flowing water they could not drink. God sent the beasts to the plagues to eat them, and the frog to ruin them. God gave over the produce to locusts, destroyed the vines with hail and the fig trees. Oh, the cattle too gone to the hail. And their flocks to fire, anger, condemnation. Tsurus, oh, Tsurus, a path through anger, not withholding their souls from death. Given up their names to pestilence, their animals to pestilence. The firstborn slapped down in Egypt, the first of the strength to the tents. Of Ham the people traveled on like sheep, and God guided them in the wilderness. God led them safely. They did not fear the sea covered over the enemies. God brought them to the border, the mountain, God's right hand. God drove out from before them the nations, their inheritance. They dwelled in their tents. They tested again. They rebelled. Didn't protect the institutions. They fell down like their ancestors. God turned upside down, smoked them with a bow. They tried to anger God with their idols and such, and God heard, God angry, rejected, God neglected, rejected and neglected. The Mishkan at Shiloh, the tent of God's presence within a human being.
Yeah.
God gave over strength and beauty to the hand of the opposition. God gave over the people to the sword. Angry even over the inheritance, fire ate up the young, the virgins unwed. Priests fell by the sword, the widows did not weep. Then Vaikatz got awakened like one who had been sleeping, like a hero aroused with wine. God drove back enemies, gave them eternal shame, rejected the tent of Joseph, did not choose the tribe of Ephraim, chose the tribe of Judah, Mount Zion. God loves like the high places. God built a sanctuary like the earth. God founded. God chose David to serve, took him from shepherding. He was taking care of animals, a shepherd. And David shepherds them with the purity of his heart and leads them by discernment in his hands. Discernment in his hands.
Yes. Beautiful. So remember, the story is not always linear, but there are lessons every day. Grateful for these psalms, giving us lessons to guide us through difficult times. Thanks for joining us. We will be back tomorrow with Psalm 79. It's going to be a big week. Sometimes muted, always rooted. Thank you, Larry Judge. That is so true. Yeah. So we hope it's a day of lift for you. And we'll be back tomorrow. Thank you. Thanks for sharing this morning of Psalms. Hope it brings you a day rooted.